it's Alex and welcome to Hey Little Thrifter. Today I'm going to be talking about some horror films, and since Christmas is fast approaching, I thought I would chat a little bit about some Christmas horror films. And this is definitely not a definitive list, far from it, and it's not even really a top 10 favourites either. It's just a selection box, if you will, of 12, because 12 Days of Christmas, horror films that are set at or around the Christmas season. And yeah, some are more Christmassy than others, but I think now is the perfect time of year to check any or all of these out. I figured I would start off with the two probably most famous ones that you might think of if you think of Christmas and horror: Black Christmas from 1974 and Gremlins from 1984. And yeah, just because they're well known doesn't mean they're not worth a mention. I think if you have already seen these, then they are always worth a rewatch. And if you haven't seen them, then yes, definitely make time for them. There's many good reasons why they are highly regarded. So Black Christmas from 1974 is, yeah, a seminal slasher classic. It is set in a sorority house as the students are going home for Christmas break, and the girls in the house have been receiving these obscene phone calls and things go from there. It's an absolute must watch in my opinion. And Gremlins from 1984 is definitely more at the fun end of horror, and this is about a boy who receives this cute little creature as a Christmas gift, but the rules that he is supposed to follow around taking care of it are broken, and all hell breaks loose in the form of these evil creatures called Gremlins. It's an absolute ton of fun, and you should definitely go watch it if you've never seen it before. Okay, next up are two films with very similar titles, but they're very different films: Silent Night, Bloody Night from 1972 and Silent Night, Deadly Night from 1984. Again, 1984 was a really good year for Christmas horror, apparently. So Silent Night, Bloody Night is for my fellow fans of a good 70s slow burn. This is about a house that has a dark past and some horrible things happened there, and the owner is wanting to sell the place. So yeah, things are set in motion for that to happen, and a chain of events occurs involving this guy and various characters that live in the area. This one might be maybe too slow for some people, but I think it's great. I think it has a really good atmosphere and a really interesting tone to it. It also has some occasional quirkiness, which is really fun. I think this is a really underrated one, and definitely one that I would recommend. And Silent Night, Deadly Night is about a boy who, when he was young, witnessed a tragic and traumatic event involving a Santa Claus, and so he's always had a fear of him ever since. And when he reaches the age of 18, he goes to work at a toy store, and with it being Christmas, there is a Santa, and his childhood trauma is triggered, and yeah, you can imagine what happens after that. This is a really fun slasher. It's pretty low budget, a little bit clunky, but I think that's part of its charm. And yeah, it's definitely one worth checking out. I know this one has a bunch of sequels, which I haven't actually seen yet, but I would definitely give them a watch sometime. Next up are two more films from 1984. What was going on that year? It was just horror Christmas mad. And these are also by the same director, Tom Eberhardt. We have Night of the Comet and Soul Survivor. Night of the Comet follows two teenage sisters who are survivors after a comet falls to Earth and wipes out most of mankind. And yeah, it just follows them and their trying to survive and the various people, both good and bad, that they encounter. This one is very 80s and very awesome. It's really fun. And Soul Survivor is a bit of a different tone to that one. It does have its light-hearted moments, but has a bit more of a subdued feel to it. It is about the sole survivor, as you might guess, of a plane crash, and it seems that because she was the only one to not die in this plane crash, that death is still out to get her and claim her life. So yeah, a theme that is probably more well known in the Final Destination films. This one is definitely not flashy like Final Destination. It's much more subtle and really quite eerie. It has a really good atmosphere and some good creepy moments. Yeah, this one is, I think, a really underrated one too. Next up are 3 examples of Christmas horror from around the world. So we have Deadly Games from 1989, The Day of the Beast from 1995, and Rare Exports from 2010. Okay, Deadly Games is a French film and it's about a young boy whose house, or should I say ginormous mansion, is broken into by a man dressed as Santa Claus. So it gets a bit Home Alone with him, you know, devising a bunch of things to try and outwit the Santa Claus. And yeah, this one's a fun one. It's worth checking out. I will say I think it tries to do too many things, and the fact that it kind of doesn't lean towards one of those things in particular, it does feel a little bit all over the place, but I think it's still a fun and pretty unique one to add to your watch list. The Day of the Beast from 1995, also known as El Día de la Bestia, is a Spanish film. This is about a priest who, in order to try and prevent the coming of the Antichrist, he goes out and decides to commit as many sins as possible, and on his travels he meets a Satanist and also an expert in the occult who has a TV show, and the 3 of them come together to try and join forces against the Antichrist. This one is a fun horror comedy that is set at Christmas time and also a pretty unique concept, so yeah, I'd definitely recommend it. Next up is Rare Exports from 2010, which is a Finnish film. This is about a research team who are drilling into a mountain in a pretty remote area, and they uncover something that they were not expecting, and it's then up to the locals in the area to deal with the fallout. This is another fun and unique one. I do think this one takes a little while to get going, but it is worth checking out because it does develop into something really fun and yeah, pretty unique. It's another good horror comedy that I think deserves to be better known. Okay, next up are 2 more films from around the world, and these are for when you've just had enough of that festive feeling and you just want to be reminded of how awful the world really is and how horrible people are. So we have Night Train Murders from 1975 and Calvaire from 2004. So Night Train Murders is an Italian film, kind of the exploitation end of horror, and it's basically The Last House on the Left but on a train. So it's following 2 teenage girls who end up being victims of a group of sadists and yeah, the awful things that happen thereafter. And I think this one does enough of its own thing with that concept to set it apart from The Last House on the Left, rather than just being like a rip-off. And yeah, it's not a fun one. No one is having a holly jolly Christmas here, but I do think it's a really, really good film. It's pretty brutal in places, but I think it's really well done. It has a really great atmosphere to it as well, and a really great score by Ennio Morricone, R.I.P. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you like that kind of thing, then I definitely recommend it. And Calvaire from 2004, also known as The Ordeal, is a Belgian film and is about a man who's like a travelling musical artist who's on the road, and it's coming up to Christmas and his car breaks down in a very remote area, and he meets some of the locals, and yeah, horrible things happen. It's another not fun one, but I think an excellent film. If you like the kind of films that are classed as like the new French extremity, so like High Tension and Martyrs, that kind of thing, then definitely check this one out, because it, I think, falls into a similar category. Yeah, it's again not going to be for everyone, but I do still recommend it to those who would appreciate it. Okay, last up for the Christmas horror films, but do stick around because I have a couple of other things to talk about after this. So this is The Lodge from 2019, directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala. This is about a brother and sister whose parents have split up, and their father is engaged to be married to another woman, and the four of them are travelling to their remote cabin for Christmas. They all get to the cabin, and then the father has to leave for some reason I've forgotten, and that leaves the two kids and their stepmother-to-be stranded in this cabin. The weather gets worse and they are snowed in. This one is a bit more of a slow burn type story, and it's very atmospheric and is a really great psychological horror. I don't want to say too much more about this one because I just recommend it though. I think it fits a good middle ground between the fun slashers and the brutal extreme films that I've mentioned here. This one probably fits somewhere in the middle. And also I wanted to mention a couple of New Year's themed horror films. I figured while I'm here chatting about Christmas ones, I might as well throw in a couple of New Year's ones too. And I haven't seen too many, I'll be honest, but there are a couple, and funnily enough they're both from 1980. So we have Terror Train and New Year's Evil. Terror Train is a slasher about a group of students who hire a train to go on a train journey to celebrate New Year's Eve, and of course a secret from their past comes out and people start getting picked off, and it stars Jamie Lee Curtis, and yeah, it's a really fun one. Oh, it also stars David Copperfield, the magician. I mean, why not, I say. And yeah, this one is a good time and worth checking out. And I guess you could double bill this with Night Train Murders, two train themed horror films there. That would be a good time. And New Year's Evil is about a DJ of a like kind of punk new wave station is hosting a New Year's Eve bash, and she is receiving these threatening phone calls from someone who is saying that during each stroke of midnight in the different time zones he was going to kill someone, and she's going to be the final victim. Yeah, this one is just another fun 80s slasher and definitely a good choice for New Year's Eve viewing. So that is it. Let me know if you've seen any of these. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do let me know about your favourite Christmas and New Year's related horror films. This, like I say, this is definitely not a definitive list or anything, but just a sampling and a bunch that I would recommend. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!